Your people are your most valuable assets. Making sure they're managed properly is your number one priority. In this fun talk, I'll cover the most important principles of great team management: recruitment, goal setting, communication, collaboration, and I'll show great examples of best practice from the Beatles and from Apple. Why the Beatles? The Beatles are the most successful team in the history of music. Just last year, 60 years after Beatlemania swept the world, they were back at number one with a brand new single. Why Apple? Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, he was a huge Beatles fan. The name Apple is the same name the Beatles gave their own company. Steve played Beatles music to demonstrate the very first iPod. The Mac's startup chime was inspired by the Beatles song A Day in the Life. And Steve Jobs said this: "My model for management is the Beatles. They were four very talented guys whose chemistry made them greater than the sum of their parts. John kept Paul from being a teeny bopper, Paul kept John from drifting out into the cosmos, and George provided a tremendous amount of soul. I don't know what Ringo did." Now this quote is a little unfair on Ringo, but I've built and managed a lot of teams at startups in San Francisco and London, and over 16 years at Apple, including 10 years as Apple's head of music in Europe. And I'm convinced Steve Jobs was right. The Beatles, up to the launch of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, considered by many to be the greatest album of all time, are a fantastic model for great team management. We'll talk about team chemistry and how Deloitte's business chemistry model shows how the Beatles were set up for success. We'll talk about SMART goals and how the Beatles' goal, to be bigger than Elvis, propelled them forwards. We'll talk about innovation and how the Beatles' creative process, characterized by selflessness, freedom to fail, healthy competition, positive friction, was copied by Apple and can be employed by all teams and organizations. And we'll talk about evolution and how to manage growth and change. Along the way, we'll listen to some great music. We'll hear from Steve Jobs. I'll share stories from my 16 years managing teams at Apple, and we'll leave your team leaders entertained, inspired, and ready to help your people do their very best work.